I'm honored to address this distinguished audience of mayors from around the world at the International Mayors Summit. And it comes with no surprise that Moldova, with its resilience and sense of hospitality, serves as a fitting host for this crucial dialogue. Here, at one of the most dynamic places of Europe, we gather today to exchange experiences and best practices, aiming to forge stronger relationships, more prosperous and sustainable cities. And the summit provides a vital platform for cities worldwide to collectively tackle the pressing challenges of rebuilding and revitalizing urban areas. Throughout your discussions, you will address critical issues such as economic development, safety, innovation, and technology, advancing digitalization, and strategies for enhancing urban resilience. Very importantly, you will discuss the reconstruction of Ukrainian cities affected by Russia's war. Drawing inspiration from leaders worldwide, you will collaborate to develop innovative solutions that pave the way for a brighter future for urban communities globally. Mayors, as the closest institution to the people, play a crucial role in shaping national and international policies, as demonstrated by the example of Konrad Adenauer, a founding father of the European Union, who once served as mayor of Cologne. The European Union reaffirmed our steadfast support for cities and villages. We recognize them as engines of economic growth and social progress. Committed to partnering with cities, we strive to ensure their thriving future. I'm confident that this summit will foster productivity and inspiration, paving the way for a brighter urban future for all residents. I wish all participants a successful and productive summit.
I am honored to extend a warm welcome to participants of the prestigious International Mayors Summit that Moldova proudly hosts today. The resilience and stability of local communities have become undeniably evident these days. While Russia's invasion in Ukraine may seem distant, its impact extends far beyond Ukraine's borders, affecting the entire region and beyond. The European integration of Ukraine and Moldova has become a reality, and the role of local leaders has never been more crucial. Mayors are at the forefront of addressing the challenges, diverse needs, and aspirations of their communities. In the most difficult moment in 2022, the Moldovan city of Ungheni generously donated essential medicines that were indispensable for our sister town of Horishny Plavny. This act of kindness and solidarity demonstrates the true spirit of friendship between our communities. I believe that our collective efforts and cooperation help us to rebuild what has been lost and pave the way for a brighter future in the European family. May this summit serve as a catalyst for enduring partnership that will drive positive change for generations to come.
So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, good afternoon. Welcome back, welcome back. So this is our final rush during our main program. And of course, we need all of you. If you hear me outside, please welcome inside, because we want to start this panel discussion, which is very important in our times, in our region, which is called Rebuild Ukraine, ladies and gentlemen. So take your seats and, of course, pay your attention to what is going on here on the main stage. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite the moderator of this panel, the lady who you know very well, because 8 years ago she decided to organize the International Mayor Summit, and today we are here really on International Mayor Summit. So please welcome Iryna Ozymok, Local Economic Development Program Director, Western NIS Enterprise Fund.
Thank you. It's working. So this panel is difficult. I explain why, especially today. But I would like to invite my panelists, which is for me a big honor to have this special guest here. It's Natalia Gavrilița, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Moldova in 21-23. It's Luke Cooper, whom I met recently in London School of Economics, and he's the director of PeaceRep's Ukraine team. We cannot speak about rebuilding without Ukrainian mayors, and I'm pleased to invite Yuriy Bova, the mayor of Trostyanets. This event is about partnerships, and the city of Vilnius is a long-term partner of Ukrainian cities, and I'm happy to invite Remigius Simasius, the mayor of Vilnius in 2015-2023. The rebuilding is impossible without economic development, economic part, so it's very important to speak how to support businesses, how to give them the possibility to survive and develop. So Marcin Nowacki, Vice President of Polish Union of Entrepreneurs and Employers, is also joining us. And we were hearing at the previous discussion that networking from Poland, yes, networking is very important. So I'm very happy that Antonella Valmorbida, Secretary General of ALDA, could join us also today. You know, speaking about rebuilding today, it's very difficult because while we were listening with you to the previous discussions, the Mykolaiv was hit, and there are at least 5 people injured and 4 people who died. Overnight, the Russians have completely destroyed the 1.8 gigawatt Tripilska thermal power plant located 45 kilometers from Kiev. It's a very big loss also for the critical infrastructure because the plant was running on the coal and gas and supplied electricity to Kiev, Zhytomyr and Cherkasy regions. When we have this news every day, it's very difficult to speak about rebuilding. It looks so far away, you know, when we have the risk to have it again. But as I was saying, the reconstruction started already because for a simple reason, people decide to live there, to live in Ukrainian cities, and we don't have other choice than rebuild. So I would like to start this discussion with the example of a Ukrainian city, the city of Trostyanets in Sumy region. It's 30 kilometers from the border with Russia. The city was under occupation, then it was liberated, rebuilt, and now it's been hit again. So Yuriy, how is this to live in a city, to give people hope to rebuild, and what are the needs for reconstruction that the guests here could help you with?
Founders of the summit, the organizers, for you to understand what an occupied town is. And I don't want to spend too much time talking. A picture is worth 1,000 words. I will show you a quick video about our city. It's not about shelling, it's about something else. It's about the profile of the occupier. Because people ask me, can you talk to them? Is there some kind of human element in them? In 2 minutes you will understand.
Bonasiwa and hello, dear viewers. We are living in a time of historic transformations. Moldova's and Ukraine's EU membership aspirations and the European Council's decision to start the negotiations.
This is a wrong video.
Місто жило українське місто, яке прагнуло.
This is a regular Ukrainian town. At least it was a regular Ukrainian town before the war began.
Ситуація залишається максимально напруженою. Російські війська великою кількістю, більше сотні єдиниць техніки, сьогодні пройшли через Велику Писарівку, через Славгород і інші населені пункти Краснопільського і Великописарівського району. Зараз триває бій проти російських окупантів. Наше військо пройшла еліта російських військ, відірвалася перші дії на столицю, і фактично наше місто створило таким центром, штабом.
So our town was used by the Russian troops as headquarters. And I will read you from a diary of a Russian soldier. March 3, we looted the entire city. We looted all the stores. That has been written by a Russian soldier. We now live in this town. Everything looks awful. We are looted all the stores as fascists. And he himself decided to go and find some presents for his wife. Some kitchen equipment, some bags. Now that's the result of the occupation. Destroyed hospital, destroyed train station. Russia used tanks to shoot at the hospital point blank, to eliminate any kind of civilization. Now, the sound of the video intervenes with what the presenter is now saying. People have been tortured to death in the basements, in the buildings of our town. And people are now without home. Thousands of people had to flee and find a new place to live. Over 800 residential buildings have been destroyed. Over 250 flats have been destroyed. And the total amount of damage amounts to $120 million US. And that does not include the property that was looted. Computers, personal belongings. That was a horde that came to our land to destroy Ukraine, to kill Ukrainians. But we survived. We fought back, and Trostyanets has become the first liberated town of Ukraine after the invasion began. And since then, Ukrainian flags are raised above our buildings, and we started the reconstruction.
Yuriy, when we are talking about reconstruction and especially in engaging different funds and partners and donors and investors, of course, they all think about this repeating risk, of new attacks, and taking into account that you are so close to the border, just 30 kilometers. What is the argument? Because you were good in finding financing to rebuild, to finding partners. Like, what is the main argument if they ask you that it can come back and it can be destroyed again?
First and foremost, what we tell the donors is as follows. We want our people to come back because that's their home. Their parents are there. Usually older people who cannot live by themselves, they need support. And that's our country. We cannot go to Poland or Netherlands, no matter how good those countries are. And Moldova, thank you very much for supporting our refugees. But no matter how good the host is, we all strive to go back to our own homes. We have to rebuild, we have to create jobs. We have to rebuild hospitals, transport infrastructure, schools, energy infrastructure. Even if a missile strikes our city, like yesterday, there was a missile strike near the hospital, and the hospital was almost fully restored. All the windows were replaced because of the help of international partners. So the missile fell near the hospital. Everybody showed up. We cleaned up all the broken glass. We patched up the broken windows using OSB panels, using tarp. And the next day, the operating theater was on, and surgeons were working already on the second day. People see this. People did not believe that it's possible. They thought that we will leave again, we will flee town, but no. That is about resilience, and because of that, we have partnerships. And it's about rebuilding, it's about recovery, it's about using new standards. in rebuilding and recovery. That's what we introduced in our town, together with our country. And the president and the government are providing support as well. 5 of our neighboring towns have been included into the pilot program for smart rebuilding, for new rebuilding. That would be a new standard for Ukraine in a post-war period. And the key thing is to not just paint it over and replace windows. It's about more than that. If we use donor funding, if we use public funds, those new buildings or rebuilt buildings will have to be inclusive, safe, and energy independent. And public must be involved in this.
Within Ukraine, but for us it's also very important to understand how Ukraine is seen globally as well. And of course, we all are convinced that the world is with us, that everyone wants to support us to rebuild. The figures, the numbers we need for reconstruction are huge. According to the World Bank, the reconstruction is at least at more than $400 billion. And basically after even this day, it's growing because new attacks came. Look, so I would like to ask you, like, taking into account that global perspective, where is Ukraine and what are the economic challenges for this reconstruction?
Thank you so much, Iryna, and thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor to say a few words on this panel. I do have, did my slides get through? I was asked to, by way of background, I've been coordinating a research program since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion in 2022 on meeting the needs of the Ukrainian war economy. And we've tried to mobilize the institutional resources of the LSE as far as we can to assist partners on the ground in developing that analysis. So I was asked in particular by Iryna to make a problem-centered analysis today. And I want to be clear to caveat that analysis in this important respect by saying there's nothing that I want to present in this data that Ukrainians can't rise to and challenge. The data is very challenging, but Ukraine has shown extraordinary capacity in a war that remains extremely asymmetric against a much, much more powerful foe to mobilize its people and its domestic resources to meet the challenge of fighting the full-scale Russian invasion. And our research program, is clear in terms of our analysis that we want to support Ukraine's and Ukrainians to defend its democracy and its territorial integrity in the course of this war. And one thing that happens when wars happen is that markets tend to fail. And when markets fail in one way or another, we have institutions that can step in to address that failure. And that's broadly what we've seen happening in Ukraine. And many of the people here, of course, have been directly involved in that at the local government level, because the state is able to step in. So when markets fail, and where investment falls because of war-induced risk, when there's attacks on property and infrastructure by the invading party, the state is able to intervene very aggressively to activate economic demand in the economy. And that's basically what we've seen happening in Ukraine. And the principal way that that has occurred is through the enormous increase in military expenditures. So the total that Ukraine is spending on the war this year in 2024 is, of course, greater than your entire public expenditure in 2022. And that's a huge injection of demand directly into the economy. And one of the principal ways in which that's helping is through military salaries, in particular, a massive rise in the public sector workforce in that respect. Now, that, of course, then needs to be paid for, and that brings us on to the next slide. Next slide, please. And Ukraine's one of the challenges that you're facing now in the course of the war, the Ukrainians in the room are facing, is its debt sustainability. So we see very rising external debt liabilities, and that could become a problem. And so one of the particular challenge that we have to face when we're looking at the data is that debt to GDP ratios can be a little bit misleading. And they can also maybe incline us to particular policies that won't necessarily help. So I'm showing the debt to GDP ratio behind me, and you can see that it's going up. Now, one way that Ukraine could improve that debt to GDP ratio is by making public sector cuts. And that wouldn't be helpful because you'd be undermining the long-term productive capacity of the economy. And so a different way of looking at this data, and that's in the next slide, please, is looking at debt sustainability from the size and the productive capacity of the workforce, the working population in the Ukrainian economy. And so what we will argue in a forthcoming report is a better way to think about debt sustainability is your total external debt liabilities and actually your private debt liabilities, but that's another question, relative to the size and incomes of the working population. And that's when the data becomes a little bit challenging because, as Yuriy says, the working population has been falling in Ukraine, that you have this problem of external migration and you need to be able to persuade those refugees overseas to come back to support the productive capacity of the economy in one way or another. Next slide, please. And this one way, so I've mentioned that there are two things that are important here. One thing is the incomes of the working population, and that's really important in persuading Ukrainians to come back, the availability of quality jobs and high incomes. So that's one factor. And then, of course, the other factor is just the size of the working population. And so the working population has to both make enough income for its immediate needs, enough hopefully to go beyond those immediate needs, and then enough through tax contributions to ultimately pay back the debt that is owed, but also crucially to support the non-working population. And that, of course, means pensioners and the elderly. And what you see behind me is the challenge that Ukraine is facing, where it's this demographic challenge, and the age dependency ratio here is just a way of measuring the size of the working population relative to the size of the pension age population. And these indicators broadly show that prior to the full-scale Russian invasion, the trends were going in the wrong direction. Then we get the full-scale Russian invasion, and then they go further in the wrong direction. Next slide, please. And this is my last one. So I'm finishing on a positive here. So Ukraine has extraordinary economic resources. It has a very well-educated population. It has pretty good infrastructure. And so in the future, the forthcoming piece of research that my team has been working on, we don't take a position on whether Ukraine's external debt obligations are sustainable or not. We say that they are sustainable if certain conditions are met. That means, of course, the terms of repayment to the external parties to which the debt is owed and how big they are on a year-on-year basis. And that means there must be debt restructuring following the war. And secondly, it means that the productive capacity of the working population has to be grown very, very radically, very, very sharply. And we need to do that through investing in those assets that Ukraine has. Now, this chart is a really interesting example for me of the opportunity that Ukraine has. Because if you go to Brussels, you will find, and I know there are European Commission people in the room, and I don't mean this too critically, but one thing that is really talked about in Brussels is Ukrainian agriculture. And the type of Ukrainian agriculture that is discussed very extensively is the extremely productive, industrialized, vertically organized section of Ukrainian agriculture. What's not discussed very much is this chart behind me. And broadly, this chart behind me shows that Ukraine's agricultural sector is nothing like operating at its potential productive capacity in the future. Productivity levels are far lower than the overall Ukrainian average. Now, how do we make sense of those two things then that are true? One thing that Ukraine has in grain and other cash crops, extremely productively organized agriculture. Then on the other hand, in the overall average, Ukraine's average is below the European average and is far below the German average. Well, the answer to that, as many of you will know, is the subsistence agricultural economy. And that's where that's really dominant in sectors like dairy and milk and so on. And at that subsistence smallholder level, there's enormous growth opportunities. And that's the development challenge, I guess, or one way of thinking about that development challenge. Because if those smallholders were producing more for each hour that they worked, if they had better tools and so on, you would dramatically grow the productivity of Ukrainian agriculture. That's just one example. There are, of course, many others that you will know of. And so the real question is growing that productive capacity of the economy, restructuring the debt, and ensuring in Congress, in the US, in Brussels, in London, that there's continued large financial flows to support the Ukrainian war effort right now.
Thank you. It's look quite challenging for Ukraine, but that's, again, we just need to be realistic and to understand this global situation, to understand where we are, to build the reconstruction process accordingly. And that touching upon the demographic issues and the needs of companies, it brings me to address Martin, asking what are the needs and of the companies in Ukraine. We try to invite businesses and investors to Ukraine, saying we have human capital, saying we have great talents and we are hard workers. We also have standards for the quality of services, and we have digitalization. But in the same time, we see that Ukrainian companies are opening also abroad, in Poland in particular, and we still have millions of people living abroad. You know, how to merge actually these needs of human capital and business development according to your perspective.
Thank you, Iryna. So first of all, I think we need to differentiate like two stages of Ukraine reconstruction, or I prefer to say modernization of Ukraine. So one is happening now, of course, as the war continues. Ukraine is delivering a number of areas, but we can't really say a part of the eastern part of Ukraine that is really physically rebuilt. I mean, the process is happening there about the reconstruction of the overall country. So there are not that many, I mean, actually very few newcomers, new investors coming into Ukraine right now. We have investors reinvesting in Ukraine, including Polish companies building new production facilities, production lines. We have some of the transactions happening thanks to your presence, to Horizon Capital, again, mostly internally. But newcomers, I mean, they are waiting, and it's nothing wrong that they are waiting. The point is to use the momentum, to use the current period for them to get to know the country, to meet Ukrainian companies. And Poland, I'm glad to say, is serving as the living and economic base for Ukrainians. Between February 2022 and the end of last year, we got more than 40,000 newly established Ukrainian companies in Poland. 40,000 of all the sectors. They come with production because of the needs. They come with services, mostly the transport sector. The beauty sector is number one, of course, because individual entrepreneurs, women coming to Poland. The transport sector is, and construction sectors are the second and the third. But there are a number of businesses basically using Poland as an economic base to enter the single market. And I think this is the best way Europe and also Poland can supplement Ukraine with the development right now. And thanks to that business presence, we build partnerships. There are a number of partnerships created. that in the longer perspective would be used by Polish, European companies to invest in Ukraine. That's a natural process. In July 2022, my organization opened the office in Kiev. We have a fully operational office just because we thought that at that stage, we need to bring the business support to Ukrainian companies to come and to enter the Polish market. But in the longer perspective, we want to keep this office for our members, for our companies to operate in Ukraine. What we do now, we bring a number of companies both ways, especially our members from Poland to Ukraine, to understand the country, to influence the business and legal framework. This is a good time to speak to the government, to the officials, and present a number of cases from Poland, from elsewhere, what works well for business from the perspective of 20 years as members of the EU. So I think this is one stage. And the second stage is, of course, getting like private business, because I think the private business will make the change in Ukraine. Of course, in order to make it happen, we need to use the current time in terms of partnerships, and second, in terms of what I call institutional framework. So we need to have different public-private funds, investment funds in place to mitigate the risk of the private sector to go to Ukraine. We need to have insurance schemes for our investors going to Ukraine. This is happening, right? Germany, Poland, the US have their insurance schemes for the time of war. So Polish company can right now invest in Ukraine and fully insure the investment at the time of war happening in Ukraine. That can be also used. I know companies from other member states using Polish insurance also to go and have a presence in Ukraine. So this institutional framework is critical, again, to get ready for the private business to get involved. Without the private business, we can't really have the future of real modernization of the country. It must be a global attempt to come and invest to develop the business in Ukraine.
You mentioned some statistics. I also read new ones that 25% of companies open in Poland with foreign investments are Ukrainians. Yeah, so the number is really big. But also the border between Ukraine and Moldova got a different meaning as well, because when the ports were destroyed by Russia, lots of imports and exports went through the border. I wanted to ask whether this could be considered as it's strange to say, but as a positive side effect for the economic development of at least cross-border cooperation and economic development of these smaller cities?
I wouldn't say overnight for neighboring regions, because neighboring regions must be also ready to absorb all the opportunities in the longer perspective. So I know a number of mayors from the eastern part of Poland, and we need to look at the kind of core infrastructure that is already planned, the TEN-T network, the European TEN-T network, and design our investment plans. I mean, of regions and cities, somehow to adjust to the infrastructure. So I think we need to work jointly between, for example, Poland, Ukraine, Moldova, Ukraine, to plan investment areas. And we should not do it in the way that we purely want to bring investment into the region of Lviv, because I think that number of investments into Ukraine will go via Poland. So newcomers that are not present, don't know Ukraine, will come to Poland or to Lithuania, Slovakia, potentially even Moldova, come here, and throughout a couple of years start their presence in Ukraine. The presence in Ukraine will be the ultimate goal, but it will be the process, especially if there is lack of political or stability or security. So it's something to do jointly between regions to plan the investment areas, the whole infrastructure that is needed for that, the transportation systems, border crossings. It's still messy, right? The border crossings, we have number of them between Poland and Ukraine. But if you compare the situation between Poland and Germany before we joined the EU, we were way ahead, right? We had much more, and the quality of border crossings was really like, I mean, it was 30 years ago, 25 years ago, but the quality was really much different, much better than what we see on our borders. So there's lots of projects and plans to really deliver. There is financing for that, the public financing for that from the EU, the US, G7 countries. The point is to use it. And I can give one of the better examples that it is not happening. So in 2014, at the time of the Russian invasion to Ukraine, Poland offered a credit line to Ukraine for the development of border crossings between Poland and Ukraine. We are 10 years later. Imagine how many border crossings were built using that credit loan, that loan. Zero. One is in the process, and there was the struggle between the Polish contractor and the Ukrainian state to deliver. So we really need to work together jointly, not just as Poland, Ukraine, but as the region, and deliver, finally deliver. And I think if we leave it to businesses, if we just create the framework and leave it to businesses, it would just happen overnight, like the entrance of Ukrainian companies into Poland, into the single market.
Thank you. You brought us again to follow up. So we had Polish border, and we get to Moldovan border. And Natalia, you were the prime minister when the full-scale invasion started. So you knew what was happening. You knew about, you were experiencing all these policies when lots of Ukrainians came here and found themselves in a safe place. But I liked what Marcin said about this strategic vision, how from both Poland and Ukraine to plan the investment and economic development and rebuilding. Is there something similar from that side of the border, between Ukraine and Moldova? And what is the impact or the role of Moldova in this rebuilding Ukraine?
Bună ziua! Mă adresez audienței și primarilor din Moldova în primul rând, de aceea aș vrea să vorbesc în română. Vreau să felicit organizatorii acestui.
So I will speak Romanian, as I would like to address the mayors of the Republic of Moldova in the first place, and I would like to say that decisions are taken at the national level, but the implementation, the real impact on the citizens cannot be achieved without the plenary participation of the mayors. And I have seen during this event very relevant stories of mayors from Ukraine, and I would like all our mayors to absorb what is happening, to understand truly what is happening, and think about our role. And the question which Iryna has asked, to that I would like to say strategic thinking about rebuilding Ukraine is an element of resilience in this war. This is why we speak about rebuilding Ukraine. Here, there are two very important aspects. One, international community needs to continue helping Ukraine. We have heard about the huge costs that will follow for the reconstruction and rebuilding of Ukraine, over $400 billion. Ukraine needs to have methods, and Ukrainian cities, its cities need to have methods to protect themselves from the consequences, even bigger consequences that we have heard about today during our events. And it is really important that Ukraine is supported. It is very important that the infrastructure of the Ukrainian cities is protected. And it is important that this military help is there so that the cities, Ukrainian cities, are protected. Second thing, preparing for rebuilding Ukraine needs to include acceleration of investments, well, investments and acceleration of investments in Moldova. From the beginning of the war, as Iryna has mentioned, we have mobilized as a society, and we have managed to manage the crisis and at the same time implement large-scale infrastructure projects such as roads, investment in the railroad with the support of our partners, investments in local infrastructure, the program European Villages, and other programs which are being implemented. However, we need to understand that once the rebuilding of Ukraine will begin, Ukrainian cities and towns, especially in the east of Ukraine, and we hope this happens as quickly as possible, because we want Ukraine to win as soon as possible, so that Ukraine's rebuilding begins, because Ukrainian citizens want to live in a European country and want to target their energy resources for fulfilling the potential of their children, just as we have heard being discussed throughout the day. We want this to happen as quickly as possible, but we need to understand that for Moldova, this is pressure on the construction sector, pressure on the labor market, and pressure on our communities. We need to get prepared now. We need to grow our capacities, to build our capacities now, to be prepared for a major regional process. And this is why I would like to encourage mayors here to talk to your colleagues here, other countries, other partners here, create those partnerships now, because we all need to be prepared. We need to prepare our communities to be able to cope with this process of rebuilding Ukraine. For Moldova, this is also pressure on the labor market, and this is also the pressure on the prices, construction sector. So we need to hurry up now and be efficient in accessing European funds, efficient in implementing programs which exist today, and programs which we could still access. Moldova has signed lately, joined many European programs lately, and we all need to, in partnership with mayors from Ukraine, how to access these funds and prepare ourselves for rebuilding Ukraine. And secondly, I would like to underline what Marcin said. Again, calling upon the mayors of the Republic of Moldova, now we need to encourage private companies to come and invest. This is why, as Marcin said, it would be really good to have companies here to have companies come here and start working. Moldova has received lots of refugees, and there are still around 80,000 Ukrainian refugees in Moldova that could already get involved in preparing for rebuilding their hometowns. There are mechanisms which we could identify together so that we work now and have the necessary capacity for rapid rebuilding of Ukraine in the future.
Thank you. I think it's very important to understand that exactly this human capital that you have here and this possibility to have the access to the EU funds, is very important for both countries. I'm sure when all the time when we ask mayors what they need to rebuild, they always say, give us weapons, because first we win and then we will have less to rebuild. That's why this partnership between cities is important, because it's horizontal connections. It's very important, but sometimes mayors are also being able to influence on the decisions at the level of the country. Vilnius have been the partner of Ukrainian cities for a long time, and we were just talking before the panel, and you saw in the morning the presentation of Lviv and the facility called Unbroken, and it's a very generous gift from Vilnius was to dedicate 700,000 euro annually to this facility as in terms like as part of the partnership. Remigius, you as a mayor, how you see this rebuilding at this stage? I mean, it's still difficult to speak about this, yes, but then we have different realities. Some cities developing, some are being destroyed, and some are kind of bringing the people back. What should be the priority of Ukrainian mayors of those cities that are still bombed and they're still at the border? What should be their first focus?
Thank you so much, and of course, my honor to be here. I think it's not us who have to say, but we have to listen. And when you mentioned about weapons, I remember, as I was having a dinner with Mayor Klitschko on February 22nd, 2022, which means a day and a bit before full-scale invasion. So he exactly was asking, could you give us some javelins or stingers? Of course, as a municipality, we couldn't. But then he also said that, we do need your support on informational front. And that's exactly what we were doing for like 3 or 4 months until the liberation of Bucha, because then the world suddenly understood what it's all about. Before, it was not war, it was like events, it was like turbulences, it was a kind of dispute, or whatever, conflict, all these things. After Bucha, we gave up on this because everything got clear. So we have to listen. I think this is the most important thing. If somebody would ask my advice, I would imagine a family who lives in a house, probably like Soviet-built house, peaceful time, not a very rich country, and dreaming about maybe staying here because we lived here forever. Maybe making the house more efficient, energy efficient, putting some solar panels on the roof. Maybe changing how it's built, maybe like adjusting to modern needs, or maybe even moving to a different neighborhood or different city. And that is what people do typically think about their lives. And countries also do think about these things. If we were there like 3 years ago, we would think about transformation, about reform, about all these things. Why I'm telling this? Because if suddenly the house of the family is destroyed, so all these considerations, they do not fade away. They are still here. You have to decide whether to rebuild as it was, whether to rebuild in a more efficient, energetical way, whether to rebuild in a completely different structure, like from the perception of a person, or to move to some other city or to some other neighborhood. And frankly speaking, I think that at the moment, we are all too much focused, which is a little bit natural because it's still the war going on, especially in the eastern part, about rebuilding as it was and then making it a little bit more efficient. And that's what where like international donors are also leading and so on. And not so many people are thinking about rebuilding better, even it's a slogan in Ukraine. And actually, I'm positively surprised that when speaking to politicians and people in Ukraine, Ukrainian leaders talk more about this and they understand more about this, that you have to rebuild country not as it was, but as you want it to be. While people from abroad, they typically speak about rebuilding as it was. And I think it's a very important thing. And just for rebuilding, I think it's a very important thing just to understand whether to rebuild at all. I know it sounds very cynical, but in your city, as it was like recaptured very soon and not completely destroyed, that's one thing. But some other cities are completely destroyed, and maybe they were in a difficult economic situation before. So we have to think whether to rebuild at all, or maybe to abandon. I know it sounds difficult, but we have to rebuild in places where people want to stay, not where governments want to be. And then if rebuilding how? because all the cities were organized in a Soviet way, which are not as cozy, not as efficient as we would like to be, as it was in Western Europe. I was reforming my city a lot, which caused both admiration and criticism, because suddenly you start talking that now we have to live in the other way. All reformers meet the same problems, but I think we have to address this issue. And the last point I want to make is also about when to rebuild and on what resources. All these government resources, all IFIs, international financial institutions, is okay, but of course private resources are desperately needed. Without them, everything will be artificial and not working. And frankly speaking, I will be maybe a little bit rude again, but when I hear about this BlackRock-led huge mega fund gathering 50 billion at least, and so on, from both for private and public, first of all, and when they say that, okay, we'll gather from public first, and then we will invest after the war, openly. And then I do say to everybody very clearly, there will be no after the war in the coming 10 years. I mean, even Japan and Russia doesn't have peace agreement. North Korea and South Korea, Cyprus, Israel, whatever. I mean, you may have a more peaceful situation, but who is so optimistic to say that there will be a peace agreement with Russia in coming years? And when this investment will come? So now I'll put my other hat a little bit in here, because I also work on establishing a private equity fund to invest in Ukraine, in reforming Ukraine. Actually, I don't want to say it now, but not counting on the war to end, because we see that, of course, now there are possibilities, now there are opportunities, and the reforms have to be made now, and also this investment have to be very wise. Of course, it's not for foreigner for me to tell, but if it was my partner in Ukraine, he would say the same. Sometimes, okay, I will put it in a quite rude way. Sometimes to sell like a financial institution to a Western financial institution for 10 times cheaper price adds more reform situation to Ukraine than selling it to the other oligarch in the country. Because we have to admit that, of course, country has to be changed in terms of what is the organizational structure of it. And this, unfortunately, is still oligarch-dominated, and it has to change, which would kind of developed corporate structure and new initiatives. And I think that is important. And I think Ukraine, okay, from this perspective, I can say something. I think Ukraine also has to do something. There was no case of privatization yet in these 2 years. Very, very few exceptional cases of private acquisitions from private owners. But in case of privatization, for example, if we would like to buy some company on privatization, if it was, we would have to put deposits. And after winning it, we will have to pay it in 30 days term. It's practically impossible to pay it in 30 days term, especially in current situations in Ukraine. And if you don't win, you are not allowed to take deposit out because of the capital control. Okay, looks like a trap. Of course, it will be solved somehow, but I think it's also kind of a thing to think about, also how to employ private capital, even under such a difficult situations, even not trying to necessarily get as much money as possible, but to reform economy. I think it's also very important. And of course, the first thing I told about thinking whether to rebuild, where to rebuild, and how to rebuild, I think it's very important, and we have to support actually Ukrainian government, and of course Kubrakov, Fedorov, all of them are doing all the best about transforming it. So I think it's very important to support this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. It's again how to approach the rebuilding process, because I totally agree that it should be based on the analysis, like an economic analysis, demographic analysis. But it is also very important to give a hope to people, because if we tell them that we will rebuild jointly with businesses, with foreign partners, then there is chance that this economic part of the rebuilding, it will work, because and that's how you need to be, we all need to be very careful about this. But again, not to spend money for nothing. It should be very, very well analyzed. we are cities are competing for people, but people played a huge role in fighting for Ukraine, and the civicness was one of the most important factor for us to be where we are. Yes, not to be occupied by Russia, and building this local democracy is very important. So, Antonella, I'd like to ask you how we can build it even better, you know, maybe with the help of your association, and connect with the foreign partners more.
Yeah, thank you very much, Iryna. And I'm also pretty much aware about the fact that I am the last speaker of the day. And I hope to bring some contribution after so many inspiring speeches. I have prepared a couple of slides to help you to understand what we are doing. But when we talk about rebuild Ukraine, I really would like to underline that, seen from our perspective as ALDA, the European Association for Local Democracy, it's going to be a community approach to reconstruction. So as Iryna said, the resilience that we are all admiring in Ukraine is very much based on this local community approach, where we had heroic, and we have heroic mayors, and some of them are in this room, and also heroic citizens and civil society approach. And since 2014, we saw civil society driven policies in Ukraine, and also all these dignity revolutions were driven by civil society. So I think that, and also at the local level, there is this combination of local politics and civil society actions. Very often the mayors were civil society activists, and then when they finish their job, or they are counselors. So this is the community approach that made the resilience of Ukraine, and that very likely will be the future of Ukraine. I don't know if we are able to display the slides which I sent to Iryna some days ago.
We should be able.
We should be able. ALDA represents an association of 350 members. We are local authorities and civil society brought together. So we have in our members those two components. We are representing members from all over Europe, and maybe this is something that we need to underline today, that the European path of Ukraine will be decided by the larger Europe. So not only from Vilnius and from Poland, but it will be decided in Rome, in Malta, and in Portugal. So the accession process of Ukraine is a broad European challenge, and ALDA, with its members from every corner of Europe, was also and is also an advocate of the Ukrainian cause in every corner of Europe. Maybe also those who are far away from the border. And as the mayor of Vilnius said, we are and we have been a decoder of the Ukrainian challenge, explaining, and we are still explaining what it means for Europe, the Ukrainian challenge, and why it is important. So ALDA is using two instruments to support the Ukrainian cause. One is the local democracy agencies, and we have a map, but if it's not possible to display, I will explain. So we have local democracy agencies, which are European platforms of support with mayors and civil society groups, which are committed to certain regions and cities. So in Ukraine, we opened a local democracy agency in Dnipro for the Dnipropetrovsk region in 2015 with the support of European partners, with Lower Silesia as a region, but also other French regions and civil society groups. And the LDA in Dnipropetrovsk region is still active with more partners. We also opened a local democracy agency in Mariupol in 2017 with the support of the Mariupol City Council, with local CSOs, and also with the support of Gdansk municipality and other Polish partners. The LDA Mariupol, of course, had to move, and they are now working as a team all over Ukraine, but also from Kiev, and with other partners from Italy and also from France. We opened a local democracy agency in Odessa. We started its activities last year with the support of a Croatian region, a French region and Italian regions, and other CSOs and other partners from all over Europe. So this multi-stakeholder approach is also our proposal for the future of Ukraine, because very often, Iryna, I also have to respond the same question to the European CSOs or local authorities that we are mobilizing. What can we do now when the war is ongoing? And we have to convince our partners somehow, and we are convincing them, that the reconstruction and life is today. Life is today for them. It's not that because there is bombing in Mykolaiv today or in Kharkiv where we are going to open an LDA soon, or in Vinica, or in Lviv, where we are also taking contact in Mykolaiv. For them, life is today, and they cannot wait that the war ends. Oh, here is my presentation. Can you go further? I will show you the LDAs. Next one. So you can see the map. No, it's going to be. So also with the partners that we are talking to in Europe, we are sharing this urgency. And ALDA is the experience of the local democracy agencies, not only in Ukraine. We started to work, yes, you can go further. Once again, so you can see the map.
Can we have the map, please?
The map, yes. Here we go. Yes, it's coming. Slowly, here we go. So the blue boxes are the local democracy agencies which are existing right now, and the yellow boxes are those who are planned. And in each boxes, you see partnership from Europe, both local authorities and civil society. Some of them are more advanced than others. In particular, we are working with Kharkiv for an LDA with French and Italian regions and cities, and also the local stakeholders. And Vinica is also further advanced with several partners. So, as I said, the plan is this multi-stakeholder approach. We are accompanying these local democracy agencies, as we did, for example, for the Balkans. We are celebrating 30 years of presence in the Balkans. And there, maybe this is also something that we can mention. There is an example of our action during the war, because we brought humanitarian support, and we do the same for Ukraine. We did post-war periods, and we will hopefully do the same for Ukraine. We did enlargement process accompany, so we supported our communities for the accession process. And what I want to say, and to conclude here, is that Ukraine needs, from our perspective, long-term partnership and friendship, because the journey will be very long. And we need to secure, not only for the accession process, but for accompanying these moments that will have ups and downs. And they really need our long-standing support, which is coming from the cities, from the public authorities, from the companies, but also from the civils and civic sector. We also need to say, and I will conclude really now, that the local democracy agencies are an instrument for social cohesion and for European cohesion. We often say, Iryna, that Ukraine will need to win the war, but will also need to win the peace. And that is starting right now to build a Ukraine which will be cohesive, strongly, in its communities. And this multi-stakeholder approach is a guarantee for winning the war first and for winning the peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, but I need to run for the plane. So thank you very much
yes,
for the panel. And
thank you so much. And I think we all face that the reconstruction will not be easy. And what Antonella said, we need to win the war, we need to win the peace. But before winning the peace, we just need to understand that that's a threat, which is Russia, is not a threat against Ukraine, but it's a global threat. So here we should stay united to definitely defeat it, so we could build everything else. And here, this partnership, solidarity, joint efforts, and weapons are needed. Thank you so much.